Hello, man. Go your own way. Go your own way, man. Go your own way. Hope you're all doing well this morning. I hope everything's calm and peaceful in your life. But we are going through things. Let me see if my sound is okay. But we are going through things. Yeah, okay. Let me stop that and move back. And life is life. This morning I woke up and I got my coffee like always. Good cup of fresh roasted coffee is always nice in the morning. And the first thing I see on Fox News comes through. It's like people going nuts and inside of the Sam's Clubs and the WalMarts and the Kmarts and all the stores are packed, and it's not really. And they took a one incident thing. Two men got in a fight this morning with wine bottles, and not since 1979 have I seen a 1979 wine festival in Mentor. I seen a wine bottle fight over two people arguing over a bottle of Chardonnay or something like that. Uh, I would love to have seen the wine bottle fight, but this was not a. This is not a common incident. Well, it's what I call an exception to the rule. Uh, Most of the time in life, when you go out to a Sam's or a Walmart or in any day, on any day of the year, you're going to see a fight somewhere in some Walmart. In America, you're going to see a fight in some Sam's Club in America. Just people get crowded together in lines, and they're there for one reason. They're there because we are in the midst of a plague. So the story goes. The plague's not much of a plague, and it's a virus, and it could wound you or hurt you, but it's not much of a virus or a plague. But things play out, and one of the stories I read back in way back, and it was the Plague by Albert Camus. So I immediately go to my reading. I pull up the Plague, and then I see an article. So I click on the article, and the most popular book that's sold this month now is The Plague, Albert Camus, 1947. And in that book, he goes deeply into human nature. It's a play, is what it is. It's a play, and there's play actors in it, and he wants to show you the absurdity of life. It's the theater of the absurd, and how people act during these plagues. The plague was in Orion Orathan, in Algeria, French Algeria, or felt that French Algiers, and in the 1940s or so, and it takes place. But it shows us human nature, and it shows us what's happened, the absurd. And in Mgtow, we kind of work in these parallel worlds. We have Mgtow, which we see the deep abyss of the absurd. When we look at the other side, the normie world and the blue pill world, and most of the time it's up to us to detangle these things before they start hurting us. And they can, and they will, if we let them. Um, in the book, they're under this deadly grips of this plague, and then you can see these. You can see these things playing out in religion. Camus says that religion turns to superstition, and when the Pentelox is the name of the preacher or whatever he is, and he's giving his sermon, and the church gets emptier and emptier, and nobody wants to come around, and he can't wonder why. He wonders why. In the play, he ends up dying because he's the only one that goes out. But in his sermon, the absurdity of it was just glistening. And he was saying, "Why are these dead children?" And then he brings on this idea where it tests your faith, and it either requires you to deny everything or to believe everything, and that's your choice during these things. Uh, he cites from a book that I often cites to, which had to do with the plague before that, and then in that only 4 monks survive. And I like to say, because they were isolated, the monks isolated, and but in the plague, there are all these are actors, and they're acting out characters that are acting with the absurdity, the theater of the absurdity. These actors are acting out the characters, which are acting out life. And when confronted with the plague, the real dangers of the plague, every one of them, there's an idea in the book, and this is what the book is about. There's an idea where reality creeps in to the public, and the public lives in this fantasy world. And I talked about this all the time, the fantasy fiction blue pillars live in, the fantasy fiction that they build up, the theater, the what do they call it, the drama, the drama, the theater of drama, and the theater of the absurd. And they live in this fantasy fiction world that they build. And the drama trum or something like that. I can't remember what I called it the other day. But they live in this theater of the absurd that they built in their minds. And this when things like this happen, with the coronavirus, and reality creeps into the fabric of the public's fantasy world, and they react with disorganized terror. They do exactly what they're not supposed to be doing, is what Camus was trying to say. They'll go to church, or they'll go out to a coffee shop, or to explain to escape the rituals of isolation. They indulge in escapist rituals of entertainment. That means going to a movie, going out to a thing, going to the Sam's Club on set. If you look at the absurdity of these people in Sam's Club fighting with wine bottles, which I would just love to see. It would have been so great just to see that, because I haven't seen that for so many years. But what are all these people doing congregating in an area? So the whole thing is absurdity. And for us Mgtows, when we're told to isolate, we're very good with isolation. So we see the isolation, and it's not such a big thing for us. It's not such a big thing at all for us that when we look out at the world. I still go out. I go ride my bike every day. That's isolation. At least 60 feet from anybody, I ride my bike, and my world doesn't change. But in this thing that is happening right now with this virus, is normies and everyday people are forced into isolation, and in that isolation, which they call isolation, is a monk solitude. And then we get to watch them on our territory. We get to watch them on our territory and how they react. And they react very much different. They reject the isolation. The priest says there's two things that could happen. He says, either you accept totally the word of the Lord, or you deny it totally. And that's the way minds and people go. And it's funny how they do these things. It's like those picture and back. There's parallel worlds, which we both live in the same world, but sometimes I think I live in a different world from the rest of these people. But now that they're confronted with this idea of this horror, this terror, and Fox News is shoving it down their throat, and they use hyperbolic and yellow journalism to get people to watch their stuff, because they know people are going to be inside, and this creates the actual opposite of what is intended. Isolation is you just sit here and, like me, and you read a book, and you and I will continue reading The Plague today because it's quite entertaining, and I can giggle and laugh at the absurdity because I can see the absurdity of it because I'm a Mgtow, and that's what my life is about: observations of the absurd and observing naturalism. How the normies act during these things, and they're doing exactly what Camus would say they were doing. They're moving out of the isolation, and they're going into what he calls escapist rituals of entertainment. Now I'm reading a book now today, which I'm going to start, The Infinite Jest, is David Foster, which he talks about the same thing, the rituals of entertainment, the ultimate entertainment in his book is this video that somebody made that was so entertaining that that after watching it, you put your head in a microwave and you microwaved your head to death until you exploded because you couldn't take the world after watching this book. But in this book, some people were going to try to weaponize the videotape, and I guess The Infinite Jest is a lot about absurdity too. And in The Infinite Jest, Wallace uses the plague, and he uses the entertainment values and the collective terror of death, and how everybody starts indulging in those escapist rituals, and that's going out when you're not supposed to go out, saying the wrong thing as a Christian man, which Penelux, he dies eventually of the plague, which is more absurdity because he was supposed to be saved, one of the 4 monks that were saved, and then he became the sponsor, the poster child for the absurdity. We all want to escape real life and real world, and that's what I'm saying. In the real world, that's what most people do. They live in the fantasy fiction world that they make up in their heads, and a lot of entertainment is given to us so we can live in these fantasy fiction worlds. But when something like this happens, this is reality busting in to that, and it's a good thing. It's a really good thing that the blue pill world gets to experience this, and maybe they'll get out of their houses. Maybe they'll maybe after this is all over, they will look back and they will see how absurd they were acting before. Maybe some logic will creep in from this. Usually in these cases, what you see is the whole world looks back and they see their bizarre behavior. They'll think about how they went to the store and they started hoarding toilet paper, which is another hyperbolic thing by the media. When does the media become the terrorist? That's always been my question. When does the media become the terrorist? In this case, I think they're already the terrorists. I think they're promoting yellow journalism. It's false statements, like the 2 men fighting with the wine bottles, which would have been entertaining to watch, but every day in a Kmart, and every day of the week, probably every hour of the week in some store, Sam's Club, Kmart, Costco, BJ's Club, or like that, you're going to have some kind of violent thing happening. If you're cherry picking these violent things, you can make a story a day, make it so hyperbolic that the people start believing it. And then they get that fantasy fiction world to live in, that fantasy fiction world of terror, of utter terror. They may even want to go witness these things. So people, last time I seen these Kmart things happening, people started migrating to the Kmarts, and the Kmart actually did better They started selling loads of stuff off of their shelves, and they were happy that the news people were there looking around, filming. All the YouTube, every YouTuber was filming so he can catch the wine bottle fight, which is absurd. That's the worst of human nature. And they were doing exactly the thing that during the SARS epidemic, that we can look back at that, and they were doing exactly the thing that the former plague, that they weren't supposed to do. They weren't supposed to go out to the coffee shops, the Starbucks. You're not supposed to go to the Starbucks and pee on the seats like Joe does. You're not supposed to go to the Kmart or the Sam's Club, but you have to do it. Something inspires them to do that, and the absurdity creeps in. And us Mgtows, we get to sit back on the Mgtow bench and just watch and point and laugh, and you can just sit back and watch it, and you can look at the world. You can look at the world in which we live in, and it's like horrible. It's a horrible. It's a parallel worlds between these two groups, and it makes me sad how all the normies live in this fantasy fiction world. This theater, all the world is a theater, says Shakespeare, and he was right, and that's how they act, and they're living these fantasy fiction worlds. But with the things like this it breaks them out of that, and they always do these absurd things. They do the weirdest things, and we get to observe it as Mgtows. And that's all we've been telling them, like, stop living in that Disney world, looking for that Disney princess. There's two worlds here. it's like stop living. That's what it's like in their head too. Just like that. It's just like that in their head. There's cognitive dissonance that flows out of that. How can I live in the real world and live in this fantasy world, these two parallel worlds? How can I do that? For most Mgtows, the cognitive dissonance of that is astounding. And the book, he talks about the cognitive dissonance of these people, and how it's astounding that they live in this world. I mean, Wallace was a little ADD himself. He could read and watch things go on and around him, and he could never do one thing at once. So he does four things at once to entertain himself in his world, which probably brought on his suicide once, he started looking at this gender wars that was going on, and the absurdity of our planet that happened after 9/11, and it was too hard for him to take. Wallace would have made a great Mgtow if he would have stuck around, if he would have waited for that, if he would have just waited before he committed suicide, waited for that answer that we were about to give him. And we were working readily on it, and he could have helped, and he would have been a great spokesman for Mgtow. But he took his life, and it was sad. It was very sad. But we as Mgtow now, we have the information ready to us. The first thing they say is stop living in that fantasy fiction world. Stop dreaming of that Disney life, a wife and a picket fence and the house and the kids running all around and all that. That's fantasy fiction. That's Disney. Dostoevsky talked about this. Camus talks about this. Albert, what's his name? Not the philosopher. I can't remember his name right now. But they all talk about it in a way that people separate, and they live in these worlds that are cognitively dissonant, like this back here. It's why I put that picture up there. Parallel worlds that they live. Their mind is split, and they believe two false things. They believe two things that are opposite of each other to be true at once. And but in times like today, when I see that, when I open up the news, and the first thing that pops up on my phone was Fox News showing two men in a wine bottle fight, which is just so entertaining. It's so entertaining. Man, I would just like to see another wine bottle fight in my life. I'd just be there and observe it. It's like, oh man, huh? But that's the entertainment Wallace was talking about. After a while, you just want to put your head in a microwave and just explode it. It's just like, it's just so entertaining. I guess that's what he was going for. After a while, we'll sit like zombies on couches and wait for these stories to happen, so we can like, oh, look at that, two men fighting with the wine bottles. Might as well be soon we'll be going back to the age of the gladiators, and we can see men with rock hammers fighting against each other, which would be great entertainment. But Mgtows can see it, and see it for the absurdity. Can you imagine back in the gladiator times when they did that, the absurdity of the entertainment that they were providing? They had already they have jumped from normality right into this world that Camus was talking about, and they became the theater of the absurd, watching men fight to death in an arena. I mean, they took the short path to it. Here in America and other parts of the world, we have games that we watch that give us these subtle entertainment that aren't quite as violent, and some of them are a little bit boxing and football, American football, men running at each other 22 miles an hour at 300 pounds and solid muscle and smashing together. It's like, and the rest of the world says, well, why are they wearing helmets? We want to see them do that. And that's the Europe says, well, why are they wearing helmets? We want to see them smashed together without helmets. The absurdity of the whole thing. When I witnessed that argument, it's like, all you Americans. When I hear that argument from somebody in Australia or France or England about, well, your football players wear helmets and shoulder pads and armor. It's like, did you look at what they were doing? Did you want to see them? And my question is, like, they want to escalate it. They want to escalate the violence and absurdity and the theater of it to seeing 300-pound men run full speed at 22 miles an hour and smash into each other's heads. The horror of that statement. But that's the world we live in. The normies, they make statements like that all the time. The blue pill people, they make statements like that all the time. That's the casual cruelty I talk about. The casual cruelty. I got a statement last night from a woman on an old video with Burris, and he married Karen Carpenter, and how they treated him, the casual cruelty, because I had offended their sense of entertainment and how they thought about Karen Carpenter and that Carpenter family. And that's what I was getting at. I was saying to reverse the genders on this and think about it. But she needed to make a casually cruel statement about Richard Burris, like he could go die. That's what she was saying, because she needed her Karen Carpenter in her life, because she needed that finalized fictionalism in her head of this perfect American family. And that's what all that was about. That's what all that was about. And the judges ruled in favor. They erred in favor of the carpenters getting the fortune that she had left by instead of the husband, because the family and that finalized fictionalism was more important to the world. That front face that they were putting on that was so fake that caused her to commit suicide. We see it. And in Mgtow, I see it now. I see the absurdity that Camus was talking about in everything now. Everything I look out at, even this new plague, which is the secondary plague to the first plague. And how the same things are happening. And how I'm feeling shame for the people around me. But as a Mgtow, just sit back on your bench, man. Sit back in this world. Lean back and, oh, that's funny. And point and laugh and enjoy yourself. That's what I say. Point and laugh. That's what I do on my bike every day when I go ride around and I look at the people in the neighborhood and I sarcastically ride by and I'm like, hey, Mrs. Jones. And I use the funny tone, the happy funny tone, which is an absurd lie because I'm not neither that excited to see her. And we do that when we greet each other. How are you today? Oh, I'm great. You see the horror on their faces when they say, I'm great, everything's great, I'm just getting some things from the store. And you know their lives are living nightmares and they want to separate. Like, keep your distance. There's a plague. And they're waking up. They're waking up now. But that's not the wake up moment. You're not supposed to wake up during this thing. You'll get that weeks down the road here and months. And that's when I'll be most fascinated with this thing. That's when it'll be most fascinating to me, is like everybody gets to look back and see what they did, see how they responded, see the absurdity, and that's when they should wake up. And that's when Mgtow should be at its fullest, to be there to assist the people that are waking up from that fantasy fiction land when they're feeling the shame of how they acted. When they're feeling that. And it's a good opportunity for Mgtow to show that. If you're not doing anything this week, sit down and read the plague and read the footnotes on it. And it's a play and it's entertainment, or you watch the movie and how people acted, and you get it. If you're bright enough, most of them will take the face value of the actor and never see the mask drop. Never see, you know how they do that in the theater. It was sure when they have the mask that flips around. There's reasons they do that. There's ideas behind that. It's like, nah, most of them will get 30 pages in and it'll be too much for their breaks. It fractures their gentle minds and they want to go back to the fantasy fiction Disney world in which they live. But this will be a great opportunity for us in Mgtow to watch and observe and see it. And that's all I wanted to talk about today. And it's going to be great, but it's not now. It's not now. Wait till after. And everybody will be like, I didn't do that, man. I was not one of those people. And they all are. Every single one of them are. They're either looking for the entertainment value of it, or they're terrified in their homes. There's rapists and murderers out there, and that's all we get from the media. I can't go out my door because I'll be raped. That's what my mother used to think. And I wanted to go punch the guy at Fox News in the face for doing that to her, and tell them that I think you're a terrorist. And terrorism comes in other forms. It comes in dark forms of parallel worlds where my mother now has to live in fear because of your fucking stupidity, the absurdity of it that they dish up to us daily, and they become the terrorists. So that's all I got to say. Watch for it, look at it, examine it, and try to have a good day, Mgtow. I'm going to do what I do every day. I'm going to go for a bike ride. I'm going to social distance myself while riding my bike and just laughing at the world as I go by. And you guys have a great day, and don't take it all so serious, and look for the absurdity of it, and do your own homework instead of listening to some jackass on Fox News. Don't let them make you into the fearful person that has cognitive dissonance, splits in his head, and his brain is thinking two different things at once, because we see all too much of that. We even see that in Mgtow now. They're fear-mongering. But have a great day, Mgtow, and get out there and enjoy life. Go to the park. Your social distance. The trees are not going to give you AIDS. The trees are not going to give you AIDS. You all take care, and thanks for coming around. And thanks for being Mgtow. Mgtow.